Hi, so I've been asked to show some of my blades. Just different things I've got in the collection, from long swords to short swords and everything in between, including this one, which will make sense in a few videos. So let's take a look at some of these things. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm down here on the ground. Is because this table is just a cheap table. If I try to put everything up here, I won't have a table. So let's do this one at a time. First off is this. Now this will make sense in a few videos. This is the components of one of the very first swords I had. Not the first sword. I used to own a katana, but I lived in an area kind of like the Bronx with some not so nice people. So this is what's left of the first blades that I have, and the components of its twin, which are here. These are just wall hangers, but you can clean them up really nice. Stay tuned for this one. And speaking of videos coming up, this is not mine, though I have borrowed it off a friend, because as soon as the weather fixes itself and a few other bits and pieces that have delayed production, this is to do with an upcoming video, and I'm sure you can figure out what the topic might be. Now, to quickly finish off the collection of blades that aren't mine, we have this beautiful beast. This is a sword blank made by a really good smith in Australia, and it's not mine. I've just been tasked to hold on to it for a friend of mine, along with their main training sword, Viking one, and a cheap training sword, English one. So they're not mine, but they're in my collection for the moment. Now, one of the first training blades I ever had was this one, which doesn't exist anymore. And I'm keeping it like this because I kind of like it broken, even though I could kind of fix it. It's hard to fix a broken blade unless you have elven smiths and you live in a J.R.R. Tolkien world. A funny story with this one. This pommel and crossguard is the second batch of a one-of-a-kind. Someone that I used to know commissioned a smith to make a one-of-a-kind set, and they promised, absolutely promised, that they would break the mold afterwards. Many years later, I was gifted this pommel and crossguard, not this blade. This blade broke a couple of times and I had to repair it. And it wasn't until a couple of years after that that it was pointed out this shouldn't exist. It's really good. It still is. I really need to remake that. And while we're on the topic of broken blades, I did buy an old messer, which I will turn into a nice chopper at some stage, eventually. Also, I have another broken blade. Doesn't look broken, but it actually is because of the set at the tip, which is unfortunate. It means it could chop well, but if I try to stab, there's a chance of that bending, cracking, and a sharp end going into someone. So it's kind of retired, even though it looks fine at first glance. And not that I have somehow collected a whole heap of broken blades. This one was broken over a shield. Yeah, I might collect broken blades. I also have a collection of random knife blank blades, but I'm yet to do anything with these. I really need to get to that eventually. Totally not weird, I've got a collection of knife parts in there, as well as other random blades. Speaking of knives, the first one I ever made is still working. Looks like a piece of shit, but it works really well. Simple little Viking sacks, and it's really secure, and all I did was pilot drill the wood, heat the tang, and drive it in, and it's stuck, and I'm surprised. Oh, and then wrapped it in a crappy bit of leather. It's a good knife for training. I also have my absolute favourite knife. This is a Scottish dirk, and eventually there'll be a video on dirks. I've been speaking to a guy on Reddit about that, and I need to get back to him, but so much has been happening. But soon enough, I'll do a video on some knives, and this one will definitely feature. I also have an honorary knife made of red deer antler, leather, and brass, which is a little bitty on the construction, from my old club. Even though I'm not an official member anymore, the guy, I think, needed a bit of money and was willing to sell me a members only dagger. So, extra training dagger, why not? Now, that same guy sold me a hand and a half, which is kind of crappy, to be honest. However, it's heavy and it's kind of good for training because it makes you train a bit slower. So we still use it, myself and my club members. But steel's good, at least. The rest of it, not so much. Now, we get on to the good part of the story time. This is a hand and a half from Wolfland Armories. It is a very nice sword, but it's not what I ordered. A little while ago, let me pull up a chair.
Alright, story time.
So, at an event one time, kind of like a Ren fair, I approached a friend of mine who had some really pretty looking swords. And he said the reason he bought from these guys is it wasn't just the look of these swords, but it was also the sound. I said, what do you mean? So he pulls out a dagger and goes, let me explain. So I pretty much stopped what I was doing, pulled out my phone and started taking notes as to where this guy bought the sword and ended up buying one myself. Now, don't rush out and go and grab a sword from Wolfland Armories. There's pros and there's cons with this sword. Pro, it sounds really good. This sword was put through its paces and I can tell you their swords are tough, which is always good. But cons, this isn't what I ordered. And honestly, shipping it back to them cost me more time and effort, not only money, than I could really be bothered with. But to their credit, we struck up a really nice deal. They said that they would give me a discount. So I asked them, is that just for one sword or for the whole next purchase? And they said for the whole next purchase. So I got a few people together and put together a really big order of swords, armor, bows. But there are a few problems with ordering through them, one of which is the language barrier. If I spoke Czech, because I don't at all, or they spoke English a little better, that could probably be alleviated, but there were still some hiccups with the order. To their credit though, I ordered this blade, which came through basically exactly as ordered and has been really tough and held up to a lot of damage and is fast and sounds really nice. They also made a dagger custom to fit the sword. And I think they did a pretty damn good job because this isn't in their stock. They also then took this, which wasn't designed for that sword, and custom made the whole thing. Cannot complain there. But some of the armor pieces were a little off, didn't quite work, didn't quite fit, don't fit well enough together, which is half my fault and half theirs, really, because I bought bits and pieces and tried to get them fit. If you're going to get full armor made, you kind of need to go to one person and get physical measurements on the spot. So I can't discredit them too much. Would I buy through them again? Yes. Would I recommend them? Not without caution. Now also in their stock was this beast of an axe. This is their blunt version, and it's not really that blunt, to be honest. I mean, I could not take this to training given the horn and the beard alone, let alone the spike, and that edge is not super sharp, but it's definitely not blunt. It's blunter than the sharp version of the same axe that I got, which is a bit sharper. Nonetheless, the reason I bought these is because I wanted a sharp one to be able to do some testing with, as well as a blunt one to be able to take to training and, you know, wail on people. Safely, of course. But I'm going to have to work with the blunt one a little bit before it's anywhere near safe enough to be able to train with.
Now, story time, part 2.
I was waiting many months for all of this stuff to get made, then it had to get shipped over the ocean, then it had to get customs and get cleared. You get the idea, it takes a while. I finally get the message on my phone to say that it's arrived in Australia and is at customs. Now, Australian customs have been known to look at stuff like this and just get rid of it, too bad, ho-hum. In fact, I know someone from the Australian HMB team that was going overseas to represent Australia who had a weapon imported, wasn't contacted, and just had customs look at it and go, no thank you, broke it, and got rid of it. Which that was a lot of money down the drain. So it hits customs, and I'm crossing my fingers that they won't ruin thousands and thousands of dollars of this combined purchase from myself and my friends, everybody who chipped in. And eventually, I get a phone call from customs who started going through the list that was itemized of everything we had. Swords, axes, armor, bows, enough to outfit a small army, but a small army nonetheless. So I think they was wondering if we were some form of militia, which we're not. And I start explaining what this equipment is, why it's all blunt, specifically it was noted in the invoice, how we're going to use it, etc., what type of events we do and everything else. So the lady on the other end of the line, there must have been a smile on her face, and she was just baiting her breath for me to finish my obviously stress-induced rant about why all of this is perfectly legal and safe. And after I'm done, she says, "It's okay, I'll approve it. My husband's in the SCA, I just wanted to make sure." Which, the SCA, by the way, Society of Creative Anachronisms, kind of like a reenactment. I had never had so much relief just wash through me so quickly. I think I spent the next 10 minutes on the phone just geeking out, talking with her about SCA events in the state that she's in and the state that I'm in, and it was great. I probably should have saved her number for future reference. Anyway, it was hilarious because I thought that the whole thing was about to get destroyed. Obviously, red flags went up, there was a big batch of weapons being imported. Whew. Anyway, back to the kit. We have this beautiful beast, which it is not designed to be a pretty sword, but oh my god, is this just the beastiness of this thing is just pretty. It's heavy, it's designed to be a heavy trainer. I got this from the captain of some of the Victorian teams down here for HMB, a guy by the name of Chris Fogwill. And no offense, Chris, I didn't like the handle. I'm going to rehandle it at some stage, but the blade itself, beautiful, beautiful. And speaking of choppies, there's a little Viking axe, nothing special, but it's good for axe training. And then one of my first weapons, which is a head of a Viking two-handed axe or Dane axe. Now this was taken off a direct tracing by the Gotland Museum, or by one of the workers at the Gotland Museum, from an artifact found in Gotland. Normally it wouldn't be as rounded, but given that it's for training, it needed to be rounded. And it is the first recreation of this on Australian soil, at least. You see these everywhere now, but when I got it, nobody had one. I'm really happy with that. And finally, we have a LARP sword, which was gifted to me by a friend of mine down here who used to do, and I believe still does, quite a bit of LARPing. They gifted this to me, and at the time I thought to myself, that's really cool, but I'm never going to use it. I have probably used this more than some of my steel blades, because in Australia you need to keep steel blades locked up, whereas this isn't really a sword. So I can keep this out of the safe at all times. So if I just go out into the backyard to stretch my legs, or want to go onto the pell or the rope and just want to train for a little bit, just having this literally sitting there ready to go is awesome. I need to get back into LARPing. Oh, and I can't forget my training spear, which is obviously blunt and padded so that when it gets struck by swords it doesn't crack the shaft. Not that blunt swords would cut through a shaft, not that sharp swords would usually cut through a haft like this, but that's a topic for another video. I need to do more spear training. I like this. And all of that is without even mentioning armor, the shields, costuming, or my feasting gear, books that I have, let alone the documents and research material. And whew, I don't have a hoarding problem. It's swords. It's not a problem. And obviously, as you saw, a lot of those are blunt for training because, well, I want to play with them, and I don't want to hurt anybody. But speaking of training, till next time, train safe and stay sword savvy. Now this video was a little different to normal, and the reason being is because one of my Patrons, Fyrestars, who is an amazing dude, asked if I could go through some of my equipment, some of the training equipment that I have. And obviously, I'm more than happy to oblige. And speaking of Patreon, if you get a chance, head on over and just have a look, because for only $1, you can get all the behind the scenes footage from videos just like this one where I totally didn't drop this sword while I was trying that flip, as well as savvy decision making to help out with videos like this where you get to choose the topic, especially if there's enough interest in it. But no obligations either way. Like I said, head over, have a look, see if it's for you, and know that I'm going to be doing videos like this regardless of whether I've got 1 or 100,000 people over on Patreon. Those pledges will just help to make more and better quality videos as this channel grows. But all of that aside, I want to see your collection, so if you have it on Imager, Instagram, or Reddit, let me know. Put a link below and I'll check it out. In fact, I'm going to go do that right now.